Each year, athletes from across the globe converge on Haines City, Florida, test the limits of their bodies and the resilience of their spirits at Ironman Florida 70.3. This documentary invites you behind the scenes of an athlete's return to triathlon after a forced 4-year hiatus, a story of grit, ambition, and unwavering dedication. From early morning swims to relentless training rides beneath the hot and humid summer sun and pounding footfalls on winding roads, we will witness the evolution of a competitor with a humble and grateful heart striving for redemption. But this is more than a race. It is a voyage through adversity and triumph. Through moments of doubt and bursts of inspiration, there will be setbacks and surprises, victories large and small, and the discovery of the true meaning of perseverance. Join us as we chronicle the milestones and missteps, the sweat and celebration culminating in one unforgettable day. This will not only be a tale of athletic determination, but a portrait of the human spirit, undaunted, unbreakable, and ever reaching for the extraordinary. Welcome to Ironman Florida 70.3, an endurance athlete's journey. Welcome, everyone, to Ironman Florida 70.3, an endurance athlete's journey. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm head coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing. This is the weekly video of the prep for the race. This is the end of week 13. This is a total of a 16-week training plan for Ironman Florida 70 of 2025. So I've been coming to you every single week with a recap of my training. This week, I want to do things just slightly different. I'm not really going to go into a whole lot of detail on my training because there was quite the event that happened over the weekend. So I want to spend most of my time kind of telling the story on what happened. But let's just get into some overall metrics for the week, just so you have some context. There was a planned total training time of 19 hours and 20 minutes. I got in 11 and a half hours. Not bad given kind of what happened. So I missed some of all three components. It was the swim, bike, and the run. So I got in about 6K worth of swim. I got in 2 of my swim workouts, one with the wetsuit, which was really important to get in because I can't get that in every single week. So I've been able to do 2 weeks so far in the wetsuit. I increased the intervals of my swim workouts. So the earlier workout in the week were 400 intervals, and that was with the wetsuit. And then the second one were 500 intervals, and that was all kind of pull and paddle work. So that's kind of not much to really talk about. I was feeling strong but slow. It's still kind of a conundrum that I'm trying to wrap my head around. I felt like I swam strong, but my pacing was still kind of on the slower side than what I would really like. But that wetsuit is really fast. I really like the wetsuit. So I am using from Zoot Sports. I'm using the Manta sleeveless wetsuit. A fantastic fit, really good wetsuit. Like I said, it's really fast. So I'm putting down, for me, kind of the average that I'm kind of swimming with a pull buoy, or pull buoy and paddles for that matter, is about 150 per 100. It's slower than what I would really like, and it's slower than I've swam in the past, but given the shoulder and the elbow issues, these are fairly decent paces for these longer efforts. I know that there's a body position situation that I've got going on where I can't really get position in the water like I really want. But when I'm swimming with the wetsuit, I'm down to like in the low 140 per 100. So I'm shaving off 10 seconds per 100. And that's a pretty solid savings. Way better than I thought that I kind of would be. I thought that I would be right around the same pace that I would swim with a pull buoy and paddles, swimming with the wetsuit. So The issue is going to become swimming, holding a line in the water when I go into the open water and swimming this course well, because this is notoriously a slower course. The way that it's laid out in a big M. So there's a lot of turns, which is going to rob you of some momentum, and making those turns, it really gets kind of congested and things like that. But I've been doing this a long time, so I'm pretty comfortable making those turns and swimming a decent line. So I'm not too concerned about the swim. I feel like my swim training has been spot on. The only other concern that I would have is swimming in a sleeveless wetsuit in December in Florida, where the kind of thinking maybe the water temperature might be in the low 70s, which is fairly decent when you're wearing a wetsuit. I don't think I'm going to be all that concerned. It'd be different if it was like in the 60s and 50s. Then that would be a concern with a sleeveless wetsuit. But I think it's going to be perfectly fine. So let's get into, that was it for my swim sessions. I was not able to execute my endurance swim on Sunday, and you'll find out why that was the case later on in the video. So let's move on to the bike. I had a couple decent bike sessions. I'm going to bring up Training Peaks just for my notes. I had some decent intervals. You know, on my Monday workout, I did some zone 2 or some zone 5 pickups. It's a pretty solid session. I like it. It simulates going from that zone 2 and then making a passing effort. So you kind of spike that up a little bit and ramp up the intensity to make the pass and get around and get back into the zone where you're supposed to be. So I like that workout. I think I'm going to keep it in there for the duration of the training plan. I also had a zone 2 effort on Wednesday because I had a massage that was done. So I really like having that in post massage to kind of flush those legs out and recover from the deep tissue massage. The Thursday one was there were zone 3 tempo efforts, and so I really kind of started to incorporate this in for these longer sustained efforts. There was no ramp up, but I like this workout. It's just a solid 20-minute of zone 3 effort with a 10-minute zone 2 as kind of like a quote unquote recovery kind of thing. And there were 2 rounds of that. So I feel like it's a pretty solid workout. It requires some focus to maintain that tempo effort, but you're not like completely gassed by the end of it. So just holding that focus and holding that effort is what I'm looking for. So after that was my last bike session of the week, and that was on Thursday. So I did miss my Saturday and Sunday bike. So there was no long ride this week, and missed one of my moderate rides, which is on Sunday. I do like where my bike fitness is at right now. I feel like I've accumulated a lot of fitness over the past, 12 weeks. So kind of what happened this week, I don't feel like it's going to set me back significantly, because I've got a lot of hay in the barn, as the saying goes. So I'm not too concerned. So let's talk a little bit about the run. So I was looking back at Training Peaks, and I did the 8K that Saturday. So that was on November 15th. And then I did a short brick session on Sunday. And then I ran again Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So that's 5 consecutive days of running. Typically, I don't do that, given the issues that I do have with my legs and my feet. But I think the way that I kind of structured the workouts, even because I'm using a run walk protocol, I didn't really consider it all that big of a deal. And some of those runs did have some ramp up intensities, but still remained in check. I felt cardiovascularly within my fitness. Something that kind of happened on Monday for the run, I started to feel some pain in my right shin. So kind of the lower leg, kind of around the ankle. And it was a new kind of sensation. I'd never really felt it in that place before. I thought it might have been kind of like the development of a shin splint or something, but I felt like it was too low for it to be like a true like shin splint. I felt like should be like further up the leg and in the front of the leg. But I could be wrong, but I kind of just gridded it out a little bit. It didn't do anything to affect my gait or anything like that. It was noticeable. And it only materialized during the run effort. Once I kind of went to my walking interval, which is the minute, so I'm still using the 7-to-1, the pain went away completely. And I could walk with no issue. And so I was like, well, this is curious. So I completed the run. And so I'm kind of looking back. Let's see what was the structure of the run. It was just a zone two effort. And so what I did was I was a little bit more conservative and went with one of those intervals was a low zone 2, did 3 other intervals at a moderate zone 2, and then the last interval was the upper range of zone 2. So it was a progressive within the zone 2 target range. No issues. So I wasn't too concerned. And, sometimes just I get like these little phantom pains. And I think many runners do get this from time to time. It's like they material and they come out of nowhere and then they just kind of like go away. So I said, well, I'm making note of it. So I'll put it in there. I'll put it in my notes and let's just move on. So I turned right around the next day and did one of my longer runs, and it was still there. But this particular run was another zone 2 effort, but it was progressive. So I used a similar kind of approach, from the low zone 2, mid zone 2, upper zone 2. And I felt okay, but that pain was still there for some reason. And I didn't quite know what to do about it. I didn't really have a plan going into the run on how I was going to progress it. And so I just kind of said, well, let's just kind of see how my legs are feeling. And so I started the first interval is always at that low end of zone 2 because it takes me a little while to kind of get warmed up for a run. And that first interval is always the hardest. And so after I do like kind of the first 5 minutes of walking warm up, then I get into the run interval. That first one always sucks. And I start to question things. And then I say, but I know that this always happens. So I said, well, let's just give it until the second interval and let's see how I feel. Second interval, fine. Started to wake up a little bit, but that discomfort was still there and started to ramp up a little bit and kind of open things up and said, well, let's just, maybe it's still taking me a little bit longer because the pain would go away when I would walk, like I said before. So I wasn't too concerned, but I executed the run, progressive in nature, felt fine, and I just noted the pain again. It wasn't intensifying, so it's not like it was just getting like progressively worse and worse and worse. It was just kind of there and just kind of nagging. So I was like, well, I'm just going to just make a note of it. So then I rolled into Wednesday's run, and I knew that I had a massage on Wednesday. So this one had some intensity to it. So this is one of my ramp up runs where I start at kind of the low end of zone 2, and I increase pace minute over minute for the 7 minutes. And it gets me into that kind of low end of zone 4 is where it kind of puts me in terms of like my pace expectations. Maybe the upper end of zone 3, really, if I'm kind of like pushing it a little bit. But again, this is a structure that I've used many times in this training plan, one that I'm comfortable with, one that I have not had any problems executing. And I didn't have any problems executing this one either. But that nagging pain was still there, but like it wasn't intensifying or anything like that. But I started to consider, I was like, I wonder if I'm starting to develop kind of like a stress fracture, because that's where that's where our minds immediately goes, like worst case scenario possible. But I wasn't about to like alter the run without it intensifying in pain. So if the pain had grown to where it got to the point where, it was persistent even during the walking interval, then I would have said, look, something's going on that I need to be careful with and make a necessary adjustment. But like I said, the pain would disappear during the walking interval and it would only persist during the run interval, but it was not intensifying. So I said, well, okay. Completed the run, was fine cardiovascular wise, felt good. Went into my massage session and I told my masseuse Sam, and I said, why don't you just poke around a little bit and kind of see what you're feeling, see if I've got some just tight muscles a little bit that's kind of pulling on things and it's just being persistent. And if it is, then let's focus on that. also see if you can feel like if there's some like anything structurally going on there. And I know you can't determine, stress fractures without x-rays and things like that. So I wasn't asking for a diagnosis, but she's pretty skilled at what she does. And, I trust her opinion, and she's been a vital part of this training process. So I said, I just let her do her thing. After the massage, she said, I don't think you have a stress fracture, because she was, putting pressure on certain points of the leg. She's like, do you feel this? And do you feel that? Is it tingling down your feet? Do you have any problems here? And I would say, no, everything's fine. And so she said, I don't think that you have a stress fracture. I just think you might have some tendonitis that's running along your tibia. So it's the tibial tendonitis. And what it's called is called posterior tibial tendonitis. She said, I think you may just have like a slight little flare up. So if you can do some icing in things, just kind of monitor on what it is. But she said, that's what I think it is. And so I trust her. And that was my last run until Friday. So that was on Wednesday. Thursday, I had a bike workout with some strength as well in the weight room. Again, no problems. I didn't have any issues riding the bike. I didn't have any issues walking in the weight room or anything like that. Nothing. And when I would push off the wall in the pool, there was no pain at all. So it only persisted when I was running. So I got into Friday's run, and it was another one of these longer runs. And so when I said, well, this is kind of the structure that I kind of want to use, when I made the plan, I just said, zone 2. But I was kind of feeling frisky. And so I said, well, let's just do a ramp up run with some zone 2 intervals as well. So what it's called odds and evens. And so on the, I want to say it was the odd interval, I would do a ramp up. So it's that 1 minute on the minute increase in pace over the 7 minutes. And on the even intervals, I would go to just a straight up high-end zone 2 run with no progression in pace. So I like it to where I still kind of keep some moderate intensity in there, some zone 2, like comfortable stuff. But then I start to push the pace a little bit within the run. So there's a little bit of more intensity, and I like that structure. It keeps me engaged because most of my runs are on treadmills, and I like to have that little mix of intensity without over intensifying and overtaxing the body, because I knew, hey, you have a 4.5 hour bike along with a brick run scheduled on Saturday, and then a long swim and another moderate bike on Sunday. So you have big volume coming up. We don't need to completely go hog wild on this Friday run. So it was reasonable. So I started the first run interval, and I felt it immediately as soon as I started running. I was like, okay, well, this is still here and it's still persistent. And so I got through the first interval fine, started walking, pain went away. Got into the second, it just continued to repeat itself where it would persist and then kind of fade off. And there was a time during the workout where I had to pause and go to the bathroom. And by the time I came back, when I came back and started to finish off the balance of the run, things seemed to change. And I started to notice then the pain was not subsiding during the walk. And so I texted Stephanie, my wife, and I was like, something is going on here, kind of, because she was with some of her lady friends from the church, and they were typically like their Bible study, but they were doing kind of like a holiday, let's go to dinner and go to the Christmas lights and stuff. So I said, just ask the ladies to say a quick prayer for me. And, something just isn't going on like I want it. It's just not right. Kind of hurts, but I don't quite know what to do. And I'm stubborn. And, I'm the kind of person who does not want to quit, and I hate it. And I don't want to alter my plan. I want to execute what it is that I set out to do, and come hell or high water, that's what I want. And so I said, I don't want to stop running, because I'm halfway through the run. So if I've gone this far, I can go the other half. And so I got back onto the treadmill, started running again, and boom, it was right there. But then when I went to the walking interval, it was still there, but it was a little softer, but it was the first time that I felt it on a walk. And I said, oh no, this is not it. This is starting to intensify. So I said, well, I just kind of feel like, kind of under attack a little bit here. And so I said, well, I'm just going to push through this and see what happens. Continued. And I got to the sixth, because it was a total of, for that workout, there was, it was 8 intervals, and I got through 7 of them. On that 7th interval, I was starting to limp. It was starting to change my gait during the run, and I was starting to limp on the walking interval. And that's when I knew I had to shut it down. And so I stopped the run short. So I got an hour and 2 minutes of the hour and 10 that was planned, and wasn't happy. But I knew that I made the right choice to kind of shut it down. So what I did was I went upstairs of the gym, and we have a cold plunge tub that's there, and it's something that you can add on to your membership. And they have an infrared sauna in there that I typically use for heat acclimation, when it comes time to training for summer races. I'm actually thinking about using that infrared sauna over the wintertime when I start to focus more on kind of dropping some more weight. I think it might be a valid way to kind of add to the training plan to kind of help in that area. But no infrared sauna. I just sat on the edge of the tub, put my feet into the tub where it basically comes up to my knee. So my entire calf and feet are in this cold plunge tub, and it was excruciating when you don't do it that often, and I don't do it that often. Like your nerves, the nerve sensors, because they just go haywire. You have a tremendous amount of nerve sensors in the feet and hands. So when you put your feet in cold water, they go crazy. When you put your hands in cold water, it can be painful. And so I've just learned that I just kind of sit there and breathe through it, kind of low and slow, deep breaths, and just breathe through it. And then all of a sudden, the pain kind of subsides as you acclimate to the cold water, and the nerves just kind of settle down things, and feet don't tingle as much from the nerves just going nuts. And I had my feet in the cold, let's look down here, for 10 minutes. That's a lengthy stay in the cold plunge tub. And so I said, well, whatever's going on, this should help kind of cool things off a little bit. And I thought that I was just having some more calf issues like I normally do. And, because I have notoriously like tight soleus muscles and things like that. And my calves are super tight all the time. And so I said, well, I'm just going to go home, and I'm going to break out the Theragun and kind of loosen things up a little bit. And then I'll get into the Normatec boots and flush whatever junk is in there. So that's what I did. And then got up from that recovery session, and it was painful to walk, which is normally the case actually for me. When I finish my therapy, those first few steps are not comfortable, but it kind of wanes off as you walk around. But this one, it didn't. So I said, well, I'm just going to go to bed and just kind of see how I feel in the morning. I knew that Katie and I, Coach Katie, we were going to be recording a podcast episode on Saturday, and we were going to have a special guest. And so these are kind of unique situations where I'm kind of limited in time. So I was willing to do my long ride on the trainer to save time. And I wasn't looking forward to a 4.5-hour ride, but I knew that there was a chance of rain as well. So I said, do I really want to go out there into the rain this close to race day, risk something happening? And so I said, well, just out of ease, I'm willing to do the trainer. But I got up the morning and I could not walk. I could not put any weight on my left leg. And so it was excruciating. It seriously felt like my lower leg bone. So the tibia and fibula are the two bones that run through your lower leg. I felt like they were just about to snap in half. It was excruciatingly painful. So I said, something is not right. So I told Stephanie, I was like, something is not right. I can't walk now. I can't put any weight on this leg. And that's when I seriously thought, I was like, my season's done. All the work that I've done for this race is gone down the toilet. I'm done. So I was like, I think I have a stress fracture. I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if I do. So we have in our area like an on-call ortho office. It's part of the overall, it's called Ortho Virginia, and you have regular ortho doctor offices that you can make appointments to, but there's what's called the ortho on call. So it's kind of like a patient's first for orthopedic. And so I didn't need an appointment, but they opened up at 9 o'clock, and I had been up since 4:30 because it woke me up out of a dead sleep because it was so painful, and I could not get back to sleep. So I told Stephanie, we got to go. I got to get an X-ray and find out like what's going on with my leg, because I was really starting to panic now that things were just completely unraveling. And so Stephanie found a pair of crutches that were in the shed from when she had her meniscus surgery to repair a meniscus tear in her knee. And so I put myself on crutches, and we got into the car, and it's not too far. It was like 10 minutes from the house actually, and got to the ortho office, got checked in, and they came and we took x-rays. It was painful just to move around. To get the x-ray was uncomfortable, and they had me in a wheelchair just because I would have to go so slow because I couldn't walk, and I'm still kind of navigating crutches. So they took the x-rays, wheeled me back into the room, and they're like, they'll come and read the x-ray and let you kind of know what's going on. So the lady comes in and has me kind of stand up, and she's like, stand on your right leg, which is my good leg. Well, quote unquote good leg. I don't really feel like I have good legs, but the right one is functioning. She's like, all right, stand on that, lift your left leg up. Now go up on the balls of your feet. I was able to do that. Balance was a little off, but I was able to execute. And she's like, okay, now stand on your left leg and lift your right leg up. And I just about crumbled. And she's like, I assume that you can't go up on the balls of your feet. I was like, there's no way that's happening. And this whole time I've been really quiet, just kind of sitting in the room, pondering like the worst case scenario that, my season's over. This race that I thought was going to be kind of like my redemption race, where I feel like God was redeeming the time that I've lost because of other, the shoulder surgeries and the elbow surgeries and the time that I've missed away from the sport. I felt like this was, kind of like my redemption coming back. And, I was kind of given this race, I feel like, by him, by God. And it was just kind of a miracle that it happened, and something that I didn't seek out. It just kind of fell into my lap. And I was just like, what is going on? I was like, I've been given this race, and, both Stephanie and I feel the same way. It's kind of like a redemption race, but it's going to depend on like how I handle it. And so I said, this is all just falling apart. And I was like, this race was given to me, and now I feel like it's being taken away, and I don't understand. And I can't figure out like what's going on. What am I being taught during this situation? Is this a lesson in sacrifice? That am I willing to lay down what I really love doing for my faith? Do I hold the sport of triathlon higher than I hold my relationship with God? And am I willing to sacrifice the sport, something that's been a part of my life for over a decade and something that I love dearly to do? Am I being asked to sacrifice that? It was a humbling moment, something that required a lot of introspection. And so I said, if it's the stress fracture, then I'm done. If it's anything else, it's going to be tight because we've only got 3 weeks until race day. And the way that it's feeling right now, this is going to be a process. And any kind of idea of expectation that I would have for performance goes right out the window. This would become a survival moment. I feel like I could maybe swim and bike, but I didn't know if I could even bike because I can't put any pressure on the pedal from that foot. So I was like, what am I going to do? And so the lady comes in, and we do the little movements, and I sit back down in the wheelchair, and she says, well, you don't have a stress fracture. And so I was immediately relieved. And she's like, however, it can take time for a stress fracture to show up on an x-ray. She's like, but we don't see any evidence of a stress fracture. But what we do see, and what we're observing now, is some posterior tibial tendonitis. So this is a new kind of tendonitis that I can add to my portfolio of tendonitis issues. And so what this is there's a tendon that runs down the tibia bone, and which runs on the inside of the leg. And you have that ankle bone that sits on the inside of your foot. What happens is that tibial tendon branches off and wraps around that bone and then wraps into the bottom of the foot to support the arch. And so that's how this tendon works. And so she said, what you're experiencing now is some inflammation in this tendon, which is why you can't flex your foot. You can't dorsiflexion or anything else, can't move it, can't put any weight on it. And she said, when you lift your leg is actually more painful than when you put it down. She's like, these are all signs that this tendon is highly inflamed, which I couldn't figure out like how it got there because I've been super conservative with my running. And so I couldn't figure it out. It's like, what did I do? I don't feel like I did anything over the duration of this training plan that would lead to this kind of flare up. And it just materialized out of nowhere. And so I said, well, what are we going to do? So because I told her, I was like, I'm training for Ironman Florida, half Ironman in December. I've got 3 weeks until race day. What am I looking at? And she said, well, we're going to put you on a steroid pack, which will it will calm down the inflammation. She said, and so I said, okay, well, that's one thing. I was like, what can I do in terms of training? Which any normal person would be just like, all right, I just need to take the week off and let this calm down. But I'm not like that. So I said, well, what can I do and what can't I do? She said, well, absolutely no running. And she's like, no cycling either. And so that immediately kind of deflated my balloon because I was like, well, man, if I can just at least cycle, then I know that I can get through the bulk of my weekend training and kind of see kind of what happens. But honestly, I don't even know if I could have like gotten onto the bike anyway, even with it being on a trainer and be able to push the pedal. So, but I have to prove it to myself that I can't do it. So I would have literally come home and just tried to get on the bike and then prove to myself, yes, you can do this or no, you can't, because that's how stubborn I am. And so she said, no cycling, no running for at least a week. And so I was like, ugh. Because all I had was 2 weeks of normal, like high volume training since my rollback week. So this was week 1 of that. I only had 1 more week of high volume training and then I go into my taper. Because I had a 2-week taper because of the volume that I had and the way that I structured it. You know, it was a gradual taper. So it wasn't just like, I'm going to cut my volume in half and, that's my taper. That's not typically the way that I do it. But for this one, I had built in a 2-week taper. And so I said, well, that means that my quote unquote normal training is done. All that I have left, all that I'll be able to execute would be like my taper. And that would basically be trying to get me back to running and cycling rather than trying to shed fatigue. So the focus of the taper would change a little bit. And so I said, well, can I elliptical? She's like, no elliptical either, which is right. Because even though the elliptical is non-impact, there's still flexion of the foot in the movement. So it does simulate fairly closely the run stride without the impact of it, even though, I find that, the knee drive is pretty over exaggerated on elliptical, but you still get really, really good glute engagement and hamstring engagement. So you're engaging the right muscles and it's similar to a run stride, but it's not a perfect substitute for it. And so I said, well, okay, no elliptical, no running, no cycling. I was like, can I swim? She said, yes, you can swim. But I said, I probably have to be careful, like pushing off the wall and that kind of stuff. And just navigating the pool deck would be questionable. She said, yeah, but no kicking. So I was like, okay, well, I can do pull and paddle work and just stick the buoy between my knees, between my legs, and, just work on upper body in the pool, which is a lot of what I've been doing anyway. So I said, okay, well, I can swim. And I was like, can I do strength conditioning, but just upper body? She said, yes, you can do that. You can do anything upper body, no lower body stuff, as long as the upper body stuff that you do doesn't hurt the lower body. And so my immediate thought was, well, I'll just add more swims to my workout, my training plan to beef up. And then immediately I said, that's a stupid idea because I only have 3 swims in my training plan for a reason. And that's because that's all my body can absorb and recover from. So if I start adding more in there, I'm going to cause flare-ups elsewhere, like in my shoulders and my elbow. And then I'll have both my upper body and my lower body jacked up and going into race day really unhealthy. So that immediately like left my brain. I was like, okay, no, just stick with the 3 swims that you've got. That's all you can recover from. Stick with the upper body, strength conditioning. We can do that, and let's play it by ear. So I came home and was looking at the training plan again. And I said, okay, all right. So I deleted all the stuff that I had in there that I couldn't do, and just to see what else I had in there that I could. And so I said, well, all right, this looks fine. I don't like it, but it's the cards that I'm dealt, and so I need to be flexible. So I spent the rest of Saturday kind of like in my office here working. So I have an ottoman that kind of sits under my desk that I can keep my leg propped up, because I still had a podcast episode to record with Katie, and I had, coaching things that I needed to do, training plans that I needed to work on for my athletes. And so, it was a working day. It was just a little bit easier to do because I didn't have, over 5 hours of training to do as well. And so by the end of that day, I went into the bedroom and like kind of took my shoe off, and my ankle was so swollen compared to like what my foot looked like. I took a picture of it, and I don't know if I want to include it here, but I may kind of throw up a little picture of what the foot looked like and what my ankle looked like. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the picture. So I no training done on Saturday, so that's why I missed my long ride and run brick, and started taking the steroid pack, and it's just nothing was helping. And the pain was pretty significant. It was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable just to sit there. And so Sunday rolled around, and that's usually when I'll do like my long endurance swim and another bike session. And I was like, there's no way that I could get to the gym to swim. I was like, I still can't put any weight on this leg, and I'm with crutches and pool decks probably aren't a wise situation to put yourself in. And so I said, well, all right, so I'll just take this day as well and just rest. And, so I basically laid in the bed with my feet elevated to control the swelling. And that was my weekend. It was super frustrating. It was really hard mentally for me and physically, as I was dealing with the pain in my foot and my ankle. But I got through it. I'm actually recording this episode on Monday evening. And so I don't want to talk too much because I want to save that for the next episode. But this week, which would be week 14 of the plan, I do have my son for the week, and he only has school like 2 days. But I'm determined to get into the gym, and I asked him if he'll help me with my strength sessions, because I've got dumbbell work and everything else, and it's kind of hard to carry dumbbells when you are kind of limping around a little bit and can't move freely. So I convinced him. I was like, why don't you do my workout with me? And if you're willing to help me kind of like get the dumbbells that I need, and, we'll work out together. So next week, I'll tell you how all that went. And so I do have my strength sessions still in there. I've kept my swims. So I do have my 3 swims going into next week, as I'm starting to feel a little bit better. I was noticing by the end of Sunday night, it was starting to ease a little bit, not that much, but I'm on the right track. And so this part of me, the insights for this week, man, it's just I don't know like what I was supposed to learn. And so I've been sitting here thinking about it, and the one thing that I can come up with is that I think that there's a little bit of pride still in me. Especially when I saw the performance that I had in the 8K, and I got kind of confident, and I was like, yeah, that was awesome. So this training plan is really working. My plan is really working. And I feel like I had to be reminded that this isn't my plan. This is the plan that he gave me. So this is ultimately his plan. And so another part of me is saying, well, it's something that I've talked about before. I don't know if I've talked about it in one of these episodes, but it was in another podcast episode, where the way that my brain kind of works and the way that I approach my training is I'm super consistent. And I think a lot of that is driven by my mentality of, I have a FOMO kind of mentality to my training. And it's that fear of missing out. And the way that I approach it is, I think that I don't know if the next session is going to be that session where I finally get a breakthrough in something. So I'm always, as athletes, we're always kind of chasing these breakthrough moments, when we finally break through some kind of plateau, or we see some kind of, improvement in performance, or what have you. I see that possibility in every single workout. I don't purposefully go into the workout trying to PR or have some breakthrough. But if one happens, then that's what I'm looking for. And I think that's why I'm so reluctant to miss training sessions and skip workouts unless it's a dire situation, which this weekend was. But I could tell you Monday through Friday, all green. I executed every single workout, even my core workouts. Everything was done, and I was tracking for, 100% compliance for the week. And I was super excited. But, I'm not kind of one that just says, I'm just going to skip this session. I'm not feeling it, or, I'm sore, or I've got this like little nagging thing. If I waited until I wasn't sore, or if I waited until something didn't hurt, I would never do anything. So it's something that I've just kind of come to grips with. These are the cards that I've been dealt. And this is just kind of the way that my brain has been wired now, is that, I'll push through it until I can't push through it. And so I learn lessons very hard, is I guess the way that I can put it. But I think that as I've kind of progressed through this training plan, I said, have 100% compliance, do every session, get every session done. Every session is important. Everything matters. And I think to a certain extent, I don't know if that implies that I don't trust God enough to bring the race day that He wants me to have, or that I want to have for myself, if I don't do my plan the way that it's been laid out. So I feel like if I go into race day and I've done all of my workouts, then I'm prepared. Then I've done what I'm supposed to do. And I think there's some degree of truth to that. But I think for this particular race for me, this is a test on my trust in Him. And that if I miss these sessions and now I'm hurt, do I trust Him enough to still give me the race day that He wants me to have? It's not necessarily the race day that I want to see, but I need to come to grips with what's the race day that He wants to give me and that He wants to provide. And do I trust Him enough to say that the work that I have done is sufficient, and whatever I can't do, He'll step in and fill the gap and provide the balance. So if I go into this race and I've lost a week of running, that's a lot to lose. But do I trust Him enough to fill in and deliver, and just kind of, I don't want to say like fill in the gap, but be there and give me what I need. I guess is the way that I can say it, is to give what I need to get through it. And whether that matches my expectations or my desires, I don't know. But do I trust Him enough? And that's kind of my I feel like that's what I'm supposed to learn during this situation that I'm dealing with now. And I think this is kind of confirmed, because when I was talking to my wife Stephanie about this, I was really kind of like being a little vulnerable. And I got a little emotional there for a little bit, that I was just like, I feel like this is all just like slipping away. This is kind of like what I saw, in terms of my race and my performance and my my training, because I enjoy the process more than I enjoy race day. I enjoy the 16-week journey to get to that one day more than I like the one day. To me, the portfolio of work that you do defines you as an athlete. What your availability to endure what is necessary to prepare for that task. That's what I value most. And so when athletes, and people post on social media, it's like, oh, I did this with no training, that gets zero respect from me. In fact, it gets negative respect from me, because I was like, well, then what could you do if you just dedicated the time necessary to prepare? And I work really, really hard for what I've been able to do over the years. I've worked super hard. And it's like, if you're one of those kids that go through school, and you had to study really, really hard, and your grades were just average, but you felt like you just had to just work really hard for those. And then you have those kids that just kind of skate by and they get good grades, but they don't really study all that well. That's kind of the situation that I'm kind of describing. I'm that kid that has to work super hard for average performance, and I guess that's just the way it's been over the years. And this year I was starting to see a glimpse of, improved performance, and I was loving what I was seeing. And it made me feel good about myself. And I kind of felt that, it's like somebody just grabbed that rug and just yanked it and pulled it from under me. And so I got pretty emotional over the weekend about this. And so what I was doing, let's get back to what I was talking to Stephanie. And so I was sitting down and I was like, I was telling her about kind of what I was feeling, kind of the emotions that are going through. And she said, well, the one story that immediately came to my mind on Saturday, and she said it just came out of nowhere, was the story of Abraham and his son, where God had promised Abraham a son. Nothing ever materialized, and it wasn't until their 90s where they actually had the son. And there's a point in the story where God says, I need you to sacrifice your son, and I need you to take him up to the mountain and sacrifice him on the altar. Are you willing to do that? And this was something that Abraham deeply loved, and something that he had worked hard for, and was feeling that God finally blessed him with the son that they wanted, and that he was being asked to sacrifice it. And it wasn't until Abraham had his son on the altar and was about to sacrifice him that God told him, stop, and delivered the ram in the thicket and said, use the ram as your sacrifice. And I want to say, like, he passed the test, but Abraham was willing to sacrifice what was held most dear. And she said, that's the story that immediately came to mind with this situation with you and what you're dealing with. And said, it's all about how you react to this situation. Do you start to stress and freak out because you can't do all of your workouts? Or are you going to trust God to deliver the ram on race day, to step in and deliver what wasn't there? And so, am I willing to do that? So this has been a pretty emotional week for me. And so that story and the way that Stephanie said that it came to her really kind of solidified my thoughts on, kind of what was going on this weekend. Like I said, it was really emotional, challenging, physically, mentally, spiritually. It was a hard week, but I got through it, and I'm learning. I feel like I'm learning the lessons that I'm needing to learn and growing. I think this is about it. Told you everything that kind of happened over the week, but now we're moving into week 14 of the plan, which is a dialed back version of the original week 14, but we'll see how it goes. I'll do what I can, try and give myself grace when it's needed, being okay with there's, a couple days in there where there's nothing being done. I need to be okay with that, and to not fear for what I perceive to be lack of preparation, because I feel like I've put in a lot of work, and that might be kind of the saving grace. Effectively, all the hay is in the barn, and there's little fitness that I could add over the next 3 weeks. And really, I'm just going to try and hold on to maybe the fitness that I have and not try and lose very much. I do know that I'll probably lose a little bit, but it depends on how quickly I can come back to running and to cycling. But if I can't, then race day is going to be what it is, and I will endure as well as I can and trust that God will step in and provide what's needed that I can't provide, because ultimately this is his race. This was his plan. And these are lessons that I'm having to learn about me, about my faith and my trust in him and his provision. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. It was a little challenging to talk about, a little vulnerable, but that's part of this process as well. This is what I wanted to do by producing these videos. I wanted to be vulnerable. I wanted you to see the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it that's involved with trying to do what it is that we're doing. You see on social media so many times all the positive stuff and all the benchmark workouts and these killer workouts, but you rarely see the ugly side of it. And that's something that you need to see and that every athlete should see. So thank you guys for joining. We're wrapping up week 13 of the plan, going into week 14 with just some strength conditioning and some swims on the plan, and we'll see how that goes. Just a couple housekeeping things. I'm not going to adjust the plan that I push out onto the website. You'll still see the 4.5-hour bike session on Saturday. You'll still see kind of the overall structure that I had, but you guys know what I was able to get in, what I wasn't. So, but just for transparency's sake, that was what the plan was. And so if you go to tabularasaracing.com, go to the Ironman Florida 70.3 page, you'll find this video along with all the other videos that have been produced for this training prep. You'll find the weekly training plan that's going to be in the picture gallery, as well at the bottom of the page. There's the downloadable PDF for all the structured workouts that took place. And if you're listening to this on the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, feel free to also go to tabularasaracing.com and check out some of the content that's there. I am a coach, so I am actively recruiting our athletes onto my roster for 2026. So if you're enjoying this content, you kind of feel like there might be a connection with us and you're interested in coaching, or if you're interested in somebody helping you along in your journey, I hope that you would feel comfortable to reach out to me. You can send me a message through the website. All of my contact information is out there. There's the little feature where you can actually just like send like a quick little text message, or you can email me, find me on social media and direct message me there. There's no shortage of ways to get a hold of me. But you can, if you just want to email me, that contact information is out there as well. But I'll just tell you, it's Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Send me an email and just check out the other content that's on the website. There's a blog that's there, some other videos that I've produced about some more of my backstory, my coaching philosophy, some of the services that I provide. And I hope that you will consider me if you are looking for a coach, or if you're looking to change things up, tackle a new journey, a new goal, a new task, or if you're just getting super busy, you just want somebody to take the reins and all you want to do is execute, then I hope that you will reach out. Again, thank you for joining me in this episode of Ironman Florida 70.3, an endurance athlete's journey. Again, I'm your host, Coach Justin, and I will see you all again next week at the end of week 14. All right, happy training, everyone. And I'll talk to you next week.